Hello and welcome to the Soul Shaking Love podcast. My name is Valerie Green from CoachValerieGreen.com, and this podcast is dedicated to bringing you the world's expert teachers on how to create a mind, body, and spirit connection, both with yourself and with your true love, and within yourself, which is what we'll be talking about today. So I'm super excited to be interviewing therapists and authors Jessica Fern and 𝐷𝐸𝐞𝐬𝐬𝐢 today. Hello and welcome.
Hi, thanks for having
Hi.
us.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that we're really all highlighted. Let me just check my settings. Yes. Because I know that we could just see David and I'm sure that we will see Jessica soon because you are just such prolific writers. I will tell you a little bit about Jessica and David because I had the privilege of reading Jessica's first book, Polysecure, and I'll plug that too, even for monogamous couples. I think that she teaches how to build secure attachment in polyamory, but it's such a wonderful model for secure attachment even in monogamous relationships. And then she and David also wrote another follow-up book called 𝐃𝐚𝐯. And so I'll tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll really dive into the talk for today, which is transforming the internal shame triangle, which is really about transforming shame into self-love. And I was so nourished reading their book. It is one of the most tender-hearted and, in my opinion, effective books for how to use the principles from internal family systems in addition to other modalities that they bring in to really transform our inner parts. And they'll talk about what that is later. The shame triangle is the internalized version of the drama triangle, for those who are curious, and really how to use IFS and other modalities to heal our parts and transform that painful dynamic into the self-love triangle, which they'll talk about. And so that's the highlight. So Jessica, I will tell you a little bit about them. Jessica is a certified clinical trauma professional, a trained IFS practitioner, and an integrative therapist drawing on 25 years of experience in somatic, narrative, psychotherapeutic, and spiritual healing modalities, which she also uses throughout the book. And she is the internationally recognized author of Polysecure, the co-author with 𝐷𝐸𝐞𝐬𝐬𝐢 of the books 𝐃𝐚𝐯 and their newest book, Transforming the Shame Triangle, which we'll talk about. And then 𝐷𝐸𝐞𝐬𝐬𝐢 is a professional restorative justice facilitator, diversity and privilege awareness trainer, and bilingual cultural broker. And he's the creator of the restorative relationship conversations model, which is a process that transforms interpersonal conflict into deeper connection, intimacy, and repair. And in the book, he guides people with how to repair our relationship with our inner parts as well, which is just so transformative. So I am just really tenderhearted and excited to be speaking with both of you today.
Thank you, Valerie.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Yeah.
Yay, and now I see that we can see Jessica, so that's wonderful. So it's always when I'm interviewing two people, it's always interesting to see who the camera is choosing. So I'm sure that it'll get both of you. So, so first of all, let's just explore what is IFS, internal family systems, what is parts work, for people who might not have heard of it, how is that really used to heal in the first place?
Mm-hmm. You want me to go, Dave, or you want to go?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. IFS, internal family systems, it's a therapeutic model, or it's even really a psycho-spiritual therapy that was founded by Dick Schwartz. And it's basically the premise is that as humans, we have multiple parts. We have multiple inner sub-personalities, and each of these different parts of us or aspects or side of us, they have different feelings and needs and even histories and desires, and that is normal. Like when you look at the normal range of human psychology, we all have parts. Where it becomes challenging is when parts start to take over and they start to dominate, and we don't have as much choice in which parts we're actually in. And so I'll leave it at that for now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that does make a lot of sense. I mean, do you maybe want to bring in an example? Like, I think the example that a
Yeah.
lot of my clients have is anxiety.
Right.
Like there's, an anxious part that comes up and kind of
Right.
causes us to sabotage our calm and center.
Exactly. Like we might have something that we're going to do and we need maybe more of our creative parts or my parenting parts or my friend parts, kind of more in the driver's seat. And then anxiety takes over and is in the driver's seat. And now suddenly I'm just worried and I'm anxious and I'm reactive and I'm not being a great like friend or mom or therapist or whatever it is that I actually have to be doing in that moment.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
interesting as I'm reflecting on what you're saying, Jess, is that sometimes people identify parts according to the feelings that they associate with those parts, right? You say an anxious part, while others are identifying with what they see as the role or the function
Right.
of the part within their inner system. So sometimes a manager part could feel anxious, and sometimes a manager part could feel afraid or something else. So sometimes it's helpful for people to have more of a schematic or a way to identify these parts. But thinking about them in terms of roles or the way that they function, what they're trying to do for us, is often a helpful way to think about them.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the way I think Jessica just presented both, the part of you who's a good mother, or the part of you that's a good friend, or the part of you that's, et cetera. And if an anxious part comes in, that could be a manager part. But, it's so useful. I think what we do normally when a part of us comes up that we don't like is we try to push it away.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
then, it's what we resist persists. And right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Right. Normally there's certain parts that are labeled or pathologized even in the society and culture. So if we have them, we don't want them. We think we're supposed to fight against them or overpower them, or we're just a victim and subject to them. So it can be a lot of inner turmoil between us and our own parts.
Exactly. And then it causes a lot of inner chaos such that it prevents us from being who we want to be in the world.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because I think one of the things that IFS did was revolutionize this non-pathologized approach to the multiplicity of selfhood. Whereas before, this would have been seen as something highly abnormal or problematic, right? To talk about different facets of our consciousness would be seen as a mental health issue, right? And I think because of that, a lot of people actually have a sense that when these parts are active, being overly identified with them. And so really intense facets of ourself can then be blended with our sense of self. And then we really start to see us through the lens of that part. And that's where you start to get a lot of the internal things that lead to what we're writing about in the book, right? i.e. the inner critic or shame.
Exactly, which I think is a good segue to talk about the internal shame triangle. Because there's three specific parts in it that you get caught in this loop. So do you want to talk more about those parts?
Yeah.
Yeah. So IFS does give like a general sense of general parts like managers, exiles, firefighters. And in our book, we're talking about very specific parts that we sort of see at the foundation of most challenges that people are actually facing. And so it is the internalized drama triangle, which we can say more about, but the shame triangle itself is the inner critic on the upper left, if the triangle is facing down. On the
Hmm.
bottom is shame. So we're referring to shame as a part, not just a feeling, a part that's holding shame and really the beliefs of shame. And then on the upper right are our escapers, which tend to be multiple. Because first, the inner critic is the voice that's beating us up. Shame is the part that hears the inner critic and really collapses and absorbs it and believes it to be fundamentally true. There is something broken or wrong about me, or I am too much or not enough. And that's a lot. And so these escapers jump into action so we don't have to hear the critic or feel the shame. And that can be through overfunctioning, it could be through underfunctioning, it could be through trying to like divert it through other feelings like anxiety or depression, or it could be through projecting it outward and getting critical towards others.
Hmm. Yeah. And um, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. Like, how would somebody know if they have an internal shame triangle?
Usually, if you can locate any activity of any one of those three parts that we just named, and again, the escapers usually functions as a cluster of parts. But really, if you can identify any of the inner critic's activity, a harsh, judgmental, should and shouldn't kind of storyline about, right, how you messed up or how you just fundamentally suck at everything or something in particular. If you feel a collapsed part of you that believes that narrative, right, the shame itself, anytime you're trying to obscure or not feel your own lived experience is a good indicator that the shame triangle is active. A lot of times when people are having a hard time connecting to their lived experience, i.e., difficult feelings, right, or a somatic response, like a strong nervous system dysregulatory reaction to something, that's a really good indicator. But one of the easiest, I think, for a lot of clients is identifying the strategies that escapers take. And so a lot of the behaviors that I think get talked about more at the surface level in some modalities of therapy and not all, are what we would call sort of very specific strategies used by escapers to get out of the feelings or away from the feelings that are generated by the interplay of these parts. For example, avoidance of conflict or people pleasing, right, or overworking. Right, these are really classic.
Perfectionism.
Right, perfectionism. These are classic strategies that you hear people just wanting to focus on specifically in therapy, and yet we're saying it's part of a more complex dynamic.
Right. No, exactly. Because I think a lot of, cognitive behavioral approaches, for example, and I'm not knocking any approach, but
Right,
if all you're doing is working with your limiting beliefs about perfectionism, let's say,
Right.
you're not
right.
getting into the harsh criticisms of the inner critic that trigger the part of you that believes that you're worthless, that then lead the escaper to choose those strategies, you know?
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah,
I'm laughing
exactly.
about it, but it's not funny.
No,
Right.
I think it's laughable in the sense that it's cliche that that's where a lot of people get stuck. And that's what we're saying. That's why we wrote this book, is it feels
Yeah.
tragic that people aren't getting to the root and finding relief. And that's what we want. We want people to really feel like they can untangle this web.
Yeah, and we saw that, there's decent or great resources for each of these individual parts, but usually people plateau with them, like even cognitive behavioral therapy or other things that are only focusing on shame, but not with the relationship with these other parts. And so the work kind of stalls and seeing the whole system has to be addressed. And then we have this real shift, this real transformation.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to segue backwards to the drama triangle, which is why this system came into being for us. The shame triangle is recognizing how pernicious the cycles can be when you're caught in a drama triangle, right? And so if the inner critic moving backwards is the persecutor, shame is the victim, and the escapers are the rescuers, right? None of those points on that triangle are ideal. None of those points are actually going to lead to a different experience. They're all going to perpetuate feeling stuck in a dynamic that's ultimately not restorative or really getting us to where we want to be. So we don't want to be anywhere on that triangle. So the perniciousness and complexity and the interplay of those various parts was so salient. You're like, this is the same kind of dynamic that's happening internally on an individual level. And that was really the key to unlocking a lot of work with clients in a pretty revolutionary way.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'll keep plugging your book. That in your book, you have a whole chapter on the drama triangle and really explaining what it is.
Yeah.
The perpetrator, the victim, and the rescuer, and how that does not allow any authenticity.
That's right.
and, makes people feel like they're stuck in these rigid roles. And I think it's really groundbreaking how you've identified how to heal that within yourself as well, because I haven't heard anyone else talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar. There's some good resources on the drama triangle, but I like where we brought it.
Hmm.
Yeah, because it's something, we both have really trained in conflict resolution and conflict transformation and restorative justice. So we have that relational and group process orientation and, right, just see, oh, the drama triangles at the root of all these conflicts.
Yeah.
Hmm. Right. And that, the inner critic is a kind of perpetrator, and that
Right.
shame, a part that holds shame is a sort of victim, has victim energy, and that the, escaper parts can be rescuers because they're trying to rescue us from our pain.
That's right.
And, that it's understandable. And I love how in your book you're so affirming towards their positive intention. And then, of course, which the IFS model is about, helping them unburden and choose new roles. And the way that you guide that is so beautiful. So let's, really talk about how do we heal the shame at its roots and not just manage it.
You wanna go?
Yeah. I think one of the key ways is developing and deepening a relationship with what IFS calls the self, with big S, capital S. And so this is a facet of our consciousness. It's a facet of our being that's really beautiful and really profound. And I think that's why, Jessica was saying at the outset that IFS is in some ways not only a psychological modality, but also a spiritual modality. It dovetails into the realm of spirituality in the sense that we're talking about something existential, right? An essence of being that's able to hold a pretty magnanimous, grounded, and spacious presence. And it's the facet of us that can operate without an agenda. And just even connecting to that momentarily really does something profound for the nervous system. And that's one of the big things that we're wanting people to do is recognize this is not something that you can damage or lose or ever go away. It's always there within us. We always can find a way to it, right, with some practice and work. And it's the place that we want to start any work, any parts work. And it's the place we want to come back to within ourselves when we get sort of reactive or knocked off our center by parts activity. So this is such a big part of the journey. It's the first step in many ways out beyond just recognizing these models of the drama triangle and then the shame triangle, seeing those parts for what they are. The second is really starting to develop a new relationship with self that feels practical and ideally not abstract or merely intellectual. So a lot of the work that we're doing in this book is starting to make that as real as possible for people at various levels. And one of the ways we do that is with the self-centered model. So we're sort of playing off the concept of self-centered, and instead of it being someone who's narcissistic or just totally focused on self, it's really someone who's grounded in this self, the capital S self, the essence of being self that allows us to stay regulated and feel safe and compassionate with our parts. Mm-hmm.
And with others.
And with others, yeah, by extension. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was really well said. And also in the book, I love that you dedicate two whole chapters to how
Yeah.
to really connect with self energy and also what it means to be, positively self-centered in your mind and your heart and in your body. Do you want to really speak more to like how do you know that you are self-centered in this positive way?
Go for it, Jess.
Yeah, well, there's a slogan or a phrase in couples therapy that's like, you got to slow down to speed up. Like, often we have to really slow down couples and be like step by step with each sentence, right? To actually get you to where you want to go sooner. And there's a similar parallel of like, once you actually have established this self connection, and then the self is what is doing the parts work, the healing that one can experience just does accelerate. versus trying to do our healing work or self-improvement work from another part that's just trying to manage, usually get rid of, or come on, get over it, or let's get here sooner, right? Or I want to be perfect. So that's why we were like, this needs 2 chapters because it's so important.
Yeah. One of the things that in the work that I do with clients around conflict resolution is try to make it clear sort of the intention to go from an adversarial paradigm to a restorative one, and really excavate the way that a lot of us have been socialized into an adversarial paradigm. And that's a big deal, right? The paradigms that we're anchored in really influence the way that we show up to interpersonal and intrapersonal interactions. So the way that we respond to discomfort or emotional upset is really driven by, right, kind of a systemic system of beliefs, thoughts, ideas, stories, narratives, right, that kind of function like an internal operating system, an iOS system. If we don't change that, then it's really difficult to get traction. And so one of the things that I do with clients is I help them map out what are the features of an adversarial approach or paradigm or mindset. And we start looking at things like urgency, right? Jessa was just talking about the need to slow down. Often in the adversarial paradigm creates pressure, creates urgency. We've got to fix and resolve as fast as possible because we're uncomfortable and we need to get out of the discomfort. Whereas, so in the adversarial paradigm, something like discomfort means lack of safety. In a restorative paradigm, that's not the case, right? We're learning how to be okay with discomfort. And it's really transparency and being with what is that creates safety. So there's these different facets of the adversarial paradigm that we're trying to help people understand so that they can see some of this parts activity in motion. Because a lot of the thoughts that we bring to hard moments, we take for granted and we just assume are reflections of some big T truth. This is a problem. That's a really important starting point to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the restorative justice paradigm and how you integrate it into healing the shame triangle and transforming it into the self-love triangle, which is the other word that you reframe from the love triangle being, a bad thing to it being a good thing inside of you. That it really does have to be self-led, meaning coming from self-energy, which is not adversarial. It's incredibly, and you name the 8 C's that, Dick Schwartz came up with for self-energy, that it's calm and compassionate and curious and centered and, to name a few. And that if you're in that energy, then you're in self-energy. If you're not, then it's probably another part who's trying to come in and fix things. Right. And that other part can't handle discomfort. So is adversarial in some way. And so it's useful to kind of look at that paradigm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, that goes back to your question of how do we know if we're in a part versus self, right? And so if there's an agenda, if there's a point B that we're trying to get to, if there's a pace at which we need to get there, right? All of these indicators are that parts are active, trying to make something happen outside of, that's not really attuned to what's really needed by the nervous systems, right, that are in the dynamic.
Exactly.
I've been doing a little like capital L, self check. And am I calm in the body? Am I open-hearted? Am I open mind?
Love that.
Yeah, I like that, Dave.
Yeah.
That's really good. It's so efficient, right? Am I calm in the body? Am I open-minded? Am I calm in the heart? I forgot exactly what
open heart, open mind, calm in the body. Yeah.
Open heart, open mind, calm in the body. Thank you. Yeah.
I was going to say open body, open heart, but I was like, I think people are getting activated by open body.
Yes, especially in today's world, right?
Yeah, too many connotations.
Too many connotations, right? I love reframing things, but that one I won't tackle.
Yeah, no, totally. But no, I agree, calm and then open heart, open mind, right? Exactly. I think that's a really good checklist.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if we're not, then there might be another part that we need to be with in order to get there. But that's beyond the scope of this interview. But I know that that's what you do with your clients as IFS therapists or, parts work therapists. That the your book is a wonderful manual for how to do this work with yourself, and of course, it also benefits to work with a qualified therapist. So, of course, I'll send people your website afterwards too. But I mean, I have to say, I mean, because I read Jay Early's book, Self Therapy, which is also a wonderful manual for how to do IFS with yourself, and really great. I think your book is just as effective, especially if you have this internal shame triangle, because you go so much deeper with these specific three parts. How to really reprogram and transform the inner critic and your internalized shame and the escaper. And so, do you want to talk a little bit deeper about the process itself, like streamline it? How, like, first you connect with self energy, which is the key, and then what do you do after that?
You go for it. So,
Great.
yeah.
So after you're centered in self, then we walk people through how to dialogue with each part. And so you're not necessarily going to do that in one sitting with yourself or one reading, right? But part by part, we really walk through the steps of here's the things you say, here's the things you're asking, here's the questions you're really staying open and curious with. And so, for example, with something like the inner critic, we want to know, well, how did you come about? And when did you come online in my system? And then we want to hear the role that it has. We want to hear the way that it's usually trying to protect us and keep us safe or keep us from getting rejected or wants to keep us in connection. So we're trying to identify its positive intention and then actually offer gratitude for that. Like, thank you for your service all these years. Thank you for doing this for me. A lot of times with escapers and even the inner critic, we can go, oh, wow, without you, like I might not have survived actually. Like I needed this strategy to get through the environment I was in. Once we start connecting to that level of what these parts are really doing for us, not just the surface level of how they say things that don't feel great or they do things that we don't really want them to do, just that starts to shift. Yeah. And then you're guided through a process of making the inner critic become an inner coach. So it still holds its positive intention, but it's doing so with better methods. It's encouraging us instead of beating us up.
Mm-hmm.
Similar escapers, they're all turning away, right? They're all like, I don't want to look at this or feel this or experience this. And so escapers, we turn into inner nurturers, which is parts of us that can turn towards whatever is happening, the good, the bad, the ugly, but not turn away from it.
Yeah. Just so powerful.
Yeah, it is. It's a deep honoring of lived experience. We all come from circumstances where we've incurred pain, emotional, relational pain. And so to honor the intentions of these parts versus shutting them out or trying to shut them down is a real honoring, actually, of the pain that we've lived through. And when people make that link from the moment, right, in real time of the activity of the part back to the origin of the strategy that the part's using to try to keep us safe, you see it in real time. You see this visible and tangible wave of self-compassion often.
Mm-hmm.
It opens up a space for vulnerability and softening where previously it was just this antagonistic dynamic. And that moment is such a sweet thing to behold. It's such a sweet thing to be part of. It really stays with you and it's very rewarding. And obviously, when you're able to do it for yourself, even more so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a I agree. That's one of the the most powerful shifts. I mean, there's many powerful shifts that happen in this process. Um, but when the part that we've previously been judging, we can actually recognize that it has been trying to protect us or keep us safe throughout the years, even if its strategies are outdated. Um, but that moment of appreciation is such a transformative moment where all of a sudden there's this sense of relief, like I don't have to judge myself anymore. And all the defenses can come down, and then the work can actually begin on helping the part to be seen and, to unburden and then to repurpose, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Just that shift of, oh, my system isn't dysfunctional or broken, but my system's actually deeply wise and often was necessary.
Hmm.
But like you just said, Valerie, it's outdated. And that's a big part of the work too, is updating, updating, updating. I mean, a lot of these parts don't even know how old you are. They think you're still 5 or 15, or maybe they think you're 20,
Right.
right? When you're actually much older. Yeah, or they
Exactly.
don't, they think you're just in the original environment that that pain arose from. And sometimes just updating to, I'm an adult, I'm not in those original situations. I'll joke with some of my parts. I actually have a child that's older than you. They'll always love that, right?
Yeah, and then you can like in your mind's eye show your parts, your son, and like, oh, got it, right? It's like
Right. Yeah.
it's a very visceral way of working with it. I love how multifaceted IFS is, and incorporating other modalities. I'm also an NLP practitioner, so I love bringing in like the images and the visualizations and like show my part all of the ways in which my life is better now than it was then, and allow that to, you know, uh, be taken into my body, and how does that feel? And so you do a lot of those processes in the book too, which I love. You guide people through a lot of these processes experientially.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. The NLP, there's a lot about direction and spatial, right? Like where is the part itself, or that we could play with how big or how far away it is. And
Hmm.
just like tinkering with parts in that way can make a big difference.
Hmm.
Yeah. It also reveals a lot about the associative nature of cognition, and it's so fascinating to me to see the way that the nervous system creates these multidimensional, multifaceted snapshots of moments, internalizes those, and then uses that as these repetitive templates against which we're right superimposing the moment onto. And that's such a most of the time unconscious and automatic process. So to slow it down, excavate it, deconstruct it, analyze it, and then really try to play with it, interrupt it is really, it's fun. It's kind of odd to say that when you're talking about a lot of processes that are emotionally uncomfortable, but it's really, I love being in that space with people, and helping them see, oh, yeah, this is the way the mind and nervous system function. What an interesting thing that the nervous system does to internalize trauma and then project it onto anything that even remotely hints of that experience. And the wisdom of that, that's a really smart way to keep a species alive.
Hmm.
Like it's a good mechanism, but in the context now that we live in, it's often right. Like it's the updating, it's the becoming conscious in having this very agencyful, choiceful relationship to something that for a lot of people is just happening, right? And I think that's a big theme or through line for the book for us in terms of an intention is how do we live with more choice in relationship to a lot of what is sort of just human?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that when you talk about in that chapter about how to be self-led, or self-centered. Sorry, I mean, I know self-led is the goal of IFS in
Right.
general, but the reframe of self-centered. You really talk about what it means to be self-centered in your body and in your heart and in your mind, and that has a lot to do with how to heal. Like you just talked a lot about how to repurpose the escaper and the inner critic, and that the repurposing in the book you talk about the shame part, which is more of an exile the way I see it, is transformed into just our raw experience. And then if we are able to be self-centered positively in our body and in our heart and in our mind, that we could attend to our raw experience in a way that's nurturing. And so that, in my opinion, is so transformative. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to talk about, actually, because it's such a key thing in terms of skill sets or abilities or capacities, rather, for partners. And so to be able to do
Hmm.
that for self is such a juicy thing. And I think it's one of the things that's really been hampered by our socialization. And it's really about specifically learning how to connect with, or recognize through awareness, and then be able to communicate and advocate for our feelings and our needs, especially our attachment needs. Right. And so being able to be with our feelings as they are without an overlay of judgment or criticism. And that's really hard when you're talking about things like anger, disappointment, sadness, grief, frustration, fear. It's so interesting how, as a culture, we work really hard to do anything we can to not be with those feelings in ourselves,
Hmm.
and to not then, by proxy, allow other people to have those feelings. And that's so much of what's driving conflict is we're not allowing ourselves or someone else to have those difficult emotions. And so then it's the strategies of the parts that are feeling those emotions that are then creating these really intense relational dynamics.
Right.
Right. So the feelings is one thing. That's just, God, if you can open that portal and really be okay with what you're feeling in real time, that's huge. That's massive for so many people because of the way we're socialized. But a deeper layer then is needs. And I like to focus on attachment needs and distinguish those from sort of the broader category of human needs, right? What does our attachment system need to feel safe and connected to the people with whom we have profound emotional bonds? Right? And that's to be distinguished from strategies, right? Need is something like safety, trust, respect, to feel important, to feel valued, even autonomy, independence, so there's kind of like self and relational attachment needs. I need to know this is possible in our relationship. But the feelings and the needs are the thing that I'm really wanting people to walk away with, feeling emboldened and empowered to connect to recognize, and not feel shame about. Mm.
I want to add the positive feelings too. So many
Yeah,
people learn early on that pleasure is off limits,
that's right.
right? And it's to be shameful about, or that being excited, or that if you're proud of yourself for doing something that you feel good about, that isn't allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I learned really early on, like, oh, my excitement isn't allowed. So that's actually more vulnerable. Like I can tell you about the traumas I went through. That's fine. But it's more vulnerable and intimate for me to talk about my dreams and my excitements
Mm.
because I would share certain dreams and hopes that I had, and I was told those were ridiculous.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, so then that'll come up to be titrated if you're,
right.
talking about like your hopes now. Like, is this okay? Am I too much?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. But I think so many clients I work with too, just their if they don't fit into the cultural, social, sexual box, very quickly they feel like those needs and desires are just make them wrong and bad.
yeah, which then feeds the shame triangle.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, it's the internalized beliefs of our parts too that you do a really good job in the book talking about how to work with those beliefs. You have a whole chapter on working with limiting beliefs. I was very impressed by it. And you list the different like that it's not just about finding the positive belief to replace it with, it's about shifting the paradigm and the whole, thought structure in which the belief was formed. And you give a lot of time to that process and do a lot of experiential work because it isn't just I mean, feelings and needs, I agree, are paramount. And just having a self-centered, in the positive way, like being self-connected, embodying self-energy, and therefore being positively self-centered with your feelings and needs is huge. I mean, gosh, it's like imagine if everyone in the world could do that, right?
We'd have a different world.
Yeah. And not trying to shame those feelings and needs, not trying to say that this is not okay or that's ridiculous or that's too much, right? As of course, there's positive intentions to those thought patterns as well. But it's then actually being with the parts to go deeper to find out what are their beliefs and what are their burdens that they're holding and unburden. You really talk a lot about that in the book too, and give a lot of strategies and tools and rituals and exercises in order to release the beliefs and release the burdens of the parts, and then to have them choose a new role. So, that's a really wonderful exploration. And like I said, we don't have time to really go over that in the interview today either. But of course, that's what your book is about. And so I'll just keep plugging the book, that you have such amazing practices and strategies in the book. And, what I want to talk about, though, is like what then is possible after. I mean, of course, you're welcome to speak about the processes and elaborate the processes that I just mentioned. Of course, where it's all leading to is that how do we transform the shame triangle into the self-love triangle? And what is that about?
Yeah, high level overview is, we're really trying to start, if we're starting with the inner critic, we're trying to turn the inner critic into an inner coach, right? So there's still boundaries, there's still structure, right? There's still that communicating what's important, right? It's really about identifying what are those values that were there all along, but were implicit, right? Underneath the strategies of the inner critic. What is it trying to help us do and advocate for, but in a way that's not undermining our sense of self, right? And so we're reaffirming really the good, like I'm on your side, right? Like a good coach would be, right? I'm helping you work through what's hard by building you up versus tearing you down, right? So it's a part of us that actually is an ally versus an adversary in a really profound way. If we can do that, then we can change our relationship to shame. And shame doesn't turn into another part necessarily. It turns into what we're calling raw, what it already is, right? Which is raw experience, right? And that's where our feelings and needs, whatever is true for us in an authentic way, it's okay. It's not something we have to change or fix. It's not a problem to solve. It just is what it is. And so being with that and allowing that without overlaying a shame story is an insane, it's just such a crazy amount of relief. Like just that alone, like being able to be how you are authentically is such a powerful shift. So raw experience, right? Shame goes into raw experience. And then finally, I think we mentioned earlier, the escapers go into inner nurturers. Right? And it's that capacity to really be with, what are the different strategies then that emerge? So instead of over functioning, we learn how to rest, right? We're really tuning in, and that's where we can reference back to that self-centered model. What do I need at the level of thought and belief? What do I need at the level of heart? What do I need at the level of body? Right? And so if I'm thinking about overworking on a nervous system level, I'm trying to do to outrun shame. If I don't have to outrun shame anymore and I'm in touch with what the body needs, then I can rest. I can give myself what the nervous system needs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's an example of how to turn a strategy into something that's actually serving us. And when I say serving us, really serving our well-being, our sense of integration, our sense of wholeness, our sense of okayness versus fragmented and doing more to try to, right, outrun or outsmart or whatever it is, or numb out, right, and block out and not see what's hard. So that's really kind of the high level places where we're transforming those shame triangle parts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and fundamentally, people will feel different. It's more inner healing, it's more inner peace. In really what we emphasize is just more agency and choice in who's responding? How am I responding? What do I want my response to be? And then just more authenticity. Because a lot of times we mistake our authenticity for the desires or needs of these parts. And there's is genuineness to that, of course, those, but they can take over.
Hmm.
So more agency, more choice, more ease, more peace, quiet mind, quiet heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I mean, ultimately, I think that's what most people want right now in today's
Yeah.
world.
Right. A better
Yeah.
relationship with ourselves. And then it does expand out to having better relational experiences with others.
Yeah. And you're less likely then, by extension, to participate in a drama triangle
Right.
interpersonally. If you're not having this internal agony and stress and adversarial complexity, then the way that you see and feel, literally feel other people and their stuff feels different. Like it's way easier to hold space for somebody's dysregulation or reactivity when you're feeling at peace and at ease with your own system. So part of what we're trying to do too, kind of we're trying to sneak it under the rug in some ways is we're wanting people to really develop and expand their consciousness with this work, and a big part of that is spending more time in self consciously, deliberately. And one of the things that we're mapping out, I don't know that we map it out in the book as much, but we're getting ready to launch our first 8-week course based on the
Ooh.
work in the book. And one of the things I'm really excited about is teaching people how to sort of functionally start feeling an integration of self. And so if you start looking, and we have this kind of trajectory map of what's possible, these different stages, and they're relatively arbitrary, and it's not like everyone goes sequentially through. But what we see is as people do this work over time, more consistently, and I can speak to this personally, it's just what your default settings are, what your baseline is more grounded in self, and you're feeling and experiencing more through self, more and more. So that's not just this sort of peak experience or this thing that you're able to get through with a lot of work. It just starts to be the place where you're abiding more.
Mm.
It's kind of the ground. And so that's something that for a lot of clients, when they start the work, seems pretty fanciful. But as you start to do it and you start to have those shiftings in the going from the shame triangle, when you start feeling in real time your shame triangle shifting into the love triangle, you start to get this horizon, this vista of what's possible. And that's like, it's very motivating.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's beautiful. I think it would be wonderful if you could share your story, but of course, if Jessica wants to add to that first.
Yeah, I'm thinking of this morning actually. My partner and I were having a conversation in the kitchen and it was about sex. So it could have like went so many different difficult ways, right? And um and I was sitting and I was like, wow, neither of us have reacted once. And it felt like the product of this work. He's been doing his version of it too. And it didn't mean there weren't moments of discomfort or questioning, right? But it was like, oh, so many of the inner landmines have been deactivated. And there's just not the same hooks to hook into and like get either one of us going. So it's like this could have been a very sideways conversation or it devolved either one of us. And it went really well.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that also speaks for itself because I think I have a lot of clients and friends that don't want to bring up issues with sex for the fear of the landmines.
Right?
And having that trust that you can navigate it with an open heart and an open mind. And
Be in curiosity and yes.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. And I have a parallel version of that that's happened this week as well. Kind of sequencing back to last week. And it's different in the sense that, what the anecdote that Jessica's sharing is really sort of the culmination of an experience where now those hooks aren't there and there's not the landmines. And yet another version of it can look like this, where last week I was really struggling with kind of depressive feelings around just what's happening in the world right now, just the level of tumult and chaos and upheaval and just suffering that's happening. I was just really having a hard time not taking that on. And that was diminishing my relational capacity, because a lot of times my strategy for dealing with that is to go internally. And there's moments where it's very difficult for me to receive support. I just go in, I need to spend some time there, and I'm naming that. I'm saying that's what I'm doing, but it can create sort of an anxious response on my partner's, in terms of, for one of her parts, right? Where she knows what's happening intellectually, but it still can be jarring for her to see where I'm going and not be able to offer me anything or feel like she's offering me anything. So I didn't realize that was happening for her in this week. There was a day where I thought she was good with where I was and it was clean and clear. And then later she revealed that it was really activated for her. And I felt instantly the righteous, rageful indignation of a part that holds a very specific story that goes really far back to my relationship with my mother. That's basically, I can't fall apart. I can't really struggle in this relationship. Like, if I really show my struggle, if I stop being functional and holding all these pieces together and being skillful, the relationship can't handle it. So I don't get to have my authentic experience. And I see that for what it is. And I felt it come alive in the conversation and had to pause. And we both, my posture changed, my eyes changed, my tone changed. And she was like, "What's going on for you right now?" And I had to breathe. I said, "There's a part that's really active right now. And I can hear its story. And it's that, and this is where you have to be really careful about what you say. You have to speak for the part, not from the part." And I'm saying, right, I'm making that distinction. This part is active. I'm very familiar with this part. And I know, and its story is that I can't have my lived experience. I can't fall apart and we be okay, because then I have to take care of you. I know that that's my story. That's not for you to fix or change, but it's really active. And so we don't live together. So we checked in the next day and was like, "Hey, do you want to talk?" I was like, there's still a lot of anger in my system. I want to talk. We're going to process this. This is important. I'm glad it's come up. It's good information. And I just need a day of going slow and doing self-care to really process the waves of anger. So I did. And it was really critical, because then today, actually, interestingly enough, we had the conversation that we needed to have. And I was able to really talk about what was happening for me without going into blame, without using and projecting that anger. I was able to name it, have it be present even in my field, but not speak from it. So in this sense, yeah, I've got a really solid skill set. I've got a lot of time with this system, and it doesn't mean that the parts go away. And it doesn't mean that then I have to not do detours and some really well-managed protocols to manage those parts. It's not that you don't have parts. It's not that those parts don't get active. You just get good at recognizing them and figuring out, okay, what is it that they need? And in this case, I needed to give it some space so that I could go through the arc of the intensity. So that's the way it can look, even with skill. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just feel really touched hearing that, because so many people who are not so self-aware. I mean, first of all, I appreciate you sharing, because a lot of people think that once you transform the shame triangle into the self-love triangle, that your parts just are calm now and happy and you won't get triggered, right? Which is, healing is a lifelong process. So I think your story was good in demonstrating that. And, the other thing that I wanted to say is that so many people who don't have that self-awareness would blame their partner and believe the story. Like, what? I'm not allowed to have I'm not allowed to fall apart. And then she would get defensive, and then you'd be arguing, and then you wouldn't be doing your internal work with that part that you needed to do in order to maybe unburden it further, or whatever you wound up doing in that day, so that you could have a more harmonious relationship with that part inside yourself, to then have more space to give your partner.
Yeah. And the thing that you just named, I've done a lot. Right. Like I know the pain of
Trust
that
me.
response. And I did it, Jessica and I were married for 10 years. We've known each other for a long time. I did a lot of that in our marriage, sadly. So in some ways she has to watch me be more skillful in a relationship that comes after our own. I mean, obviously we still have a relationship, but yeah, I'm very familiar with the pattern you just described.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to put you on the spot, Jessica? You want to say anything to that?
I'm very familiar with that pattern too.
We would need another hour just
Right. We need
for her
another
to.
episode.
No, exactly. I know as David was sharing, I was like sort of had a little bit of a look towards Jessica and like, how did she feel about David demonstrating these skills?
Oh, I mean, in essence, I'm so happy. I mean, even yesterday, we had a conversation about what was going on and just, I think it was supportive for you, Dave. But, that's what our relationship is now, where we can be that lean on each other when things are going on with our other partners because we both know each other so well. It's like we
Yeah.
know the inner workings very intimately. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and we live together and we're co-parents.
yeah,
So she is benefiting from these skills
right.
too. Like she's receiving a very different me now when things come up, and obviously they come up. So yeah,
Yeah, no, of course. Since you have a son together,
correct.
and that too is just so inspiring. I bet people are really inspired by that aspect of your relationship too, that you were able to transition your marriage into a really supportive co-parenting and friendship, and that you still live together, and that you have other harmonious relationships. And that also is a plug for your other two books. The other one that you wrote together is, as I said in the beginning, Poly-Wise, where you really give these strategies for how to, and Poly Secure is how to build secure attachment in non-monogamous relationships. And then Poly-Wise is really going deeper with these processes with how to harmonize them. I haven't read Poly-Wise, so I'm just, although you said in Healing the Shame Triangle that you borrowed some of the processes for working with parts from Poly-Wise, so I have an idea of what you say in that book. But do you want to talk about those other books too? Because I'm happy to put a link to those below as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, you've said it already so beautifully that, polysecure is about creating secure attachment with multiple partners. But really, the book is for just secure attachment with yourself, secure attachment for any relationship, even if it's not necessarily romantic, but it's attachment based. And then the follow up to that was sort of here's all the other things that come up for people doing non monogamy. And each chapter in that book goes through different challenges. And one is troubleshooting. Some of your parts want to do non-monogamy and some parts are very monogamous and don't want anything to do with this. And how do you navigate that? Or how do you navigate a relationship that's opening up that has deep codependency from years of enmeshment? How do you navigate conflict? Because there often is more conflict when there's more complexity with more people. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think you'd love it if you are resonating with our other books. You'd love that one too.
Yeah, and we start out with this is a huge paradigm. So going back to the importance of
Paradigms,
being
yeah.
able to work at the level of paradigm, I think people underestimate the enormity of what they're trying to do from a paradigmatic perspective in going from a consciousness to an ethical non-monogamous consciousness. It can't be overstated. So we're really wanting people to think systemically about all the ways in which sociocultural influences live within us, in an internalized way. So that's a through line, I think, between Polywise and Transform the Shame Triangle. That for me feels like something. How can you talk about change without talking about that facet?
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I'll bring it back to the Healing the Shame Triangle book too, that you do such a great job. You give a whole chapter on the cultural influences that have contributed to us feeling internalized shame, because doesn't start with us.
That's
Right.
right.
It's ancestral, it's cultural. Then you do a really good job in naming a lot of those, influences, and as well. You do a whole chapter on, which I thought was just so beautiful, healing ancestral wounds and shame that's inherited, from the culture. Like you talk about what have you inherited from the culture, but then how to heal it if it's not yours. And it's just so integrative the way that you talk about it to be able to recognize this isn't mine. But then I love the chapter where you draw principles from IFS, but also from Bert Hellinger's work in family constellations and
Mm.
shamanic traditions. And, there's so many influences that you bring in. So I think that the healing, if anybody who's been watching or listening to this feels like they might have an internalized shame triangle. I think, of course, I'll put your websites below too, so that if they want to work directly with you, because it's not easy to do all of this on your own. Because I do IFS with myself, and I sometimes hit roadblocks. So I also have a therapist that I work with. But what I want to say is your book is such an amazing manual for how to do this work with yourself.
Mm. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the point. So it feels good to have you reflect it back.
Yeah, you have all the steps and you have, I listened to the audiobook, and I do highly recommend both the book and the audio because the book has the processes written out and the audio has you both, first of all, you read it, both of you read it, which is really sweet. And then the practices that you guide in a really embodied way at the right pace.
Mm.
So that, people feel like they can slow down and really do it. So, and then of course, I imagine like some of the questions that you'd ask your parts, you have to pause the recording at that point, but it just feels so supportive when I was listening to it.
Good.
I listened to it to prepare for this interview, but I'll have to go back and do some of the exercises with myself too. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So glad that it was meaningful for you and that you were able to take some time with it. That's really sweet.
yeah, no, of course. I feel really honored to be highlighting this work. And also, what I want to say is this interview will be released probably in early February of 2026. And if you're launching your 8-week group, this interview will be evergreen. It'll be up a lot
Yeah.
later than that. So if you want to send me the link to the 8-week group, if people are watching this later in the year, they can see whether I've posted the link to the 8-week group below this video because I'll do that when you launch it and that way or in the show notes. So that way people can also
Great.
find other ways of working with you. Do you want to talk more about that and
Yeah, we're doing an 8-week course the end of February 2026. And it is guiding people through the book, but there's a lot in the book that's a lot in the course, that's not in the book. And there's a bunch in the book that's not in the course. But you're getting us live. People are going to get demos. There'll be space for Q&A. There's, even since we've written the book, there's like new things we're adding in terms of just condensing it or making up exercises. And then we're going to keep offering that course potentially later in the year, or we're doing it in person, like with different retreats, weekend events, and things like that. So we can't underestimate the power of getting to do this work with others, because that's the thing. It's like we feel so isolated usually in our own shame triangle, but then you realize, wait, everyone has the same structure inside in this predictable way. So the healing is exponential when it's in that group experience.
Yeah, and this will be available to people even if they can't do it when it's happening. You don't have to
Right,
be
it will be
part of the
recorded.
initial cohort, so you can get access to it at any point. It'll be available. We're actually launching a platform for courses like this called the As Right Way, and we're doing that with Jessica's god sister. Her name is Christy Decatur. Give her a little shout out here. And we're really excited because this is our flagship course. And after that, we're looking to launch another program that's really dedicated to doing the principles that are embedded in my restorative relationship conversations modality. So conflict specifically designed for working with interpersonal conflict. So this is something that we're really moving towards in the year to come. Is consolidating our work and energy and really focusing on making it accessible to a new audience.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy to be part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'll definitely, if you send me the link to that, I'll post it below the video. So I'll post a link to Healing the Shame Triangle too. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about the book Healing the Shame Triangle, where people can get it, what formats it's in, all of that?
Yeah, it's really everywhere that you can get books. The big online places, if you go to our websites, you'll see links, but we always encourage people like ask your local bookstore, your local independent bookstore if you can. But it's in paperback, it's in PDF, Kindle version, and then the audiobook is available.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I will put the link below to the book below. I mean, I always put the Amazon link, although I don't know.
Yeah.
People can also get it from their local bookstore, which I agree is better. But I'll put just default to the Amazon link below the video or in the show notes if you're listening to this on the podcast platforms. And then I'll also put a link to Jessica and David's websites, and then the link to the courses that they'll be doing. So if you see this in the beginning of February and we don't have the link to the courses, just check again in a couple of weeks, and then I'll probably put it there. So and then it'll be there for, if you're listening to this like late February 2026 to later, the link should be there. Feel free to send me an email if you don't see them, or just go to Jessica or David's website and you can hook up with their programs, their books, their courses, and how to work with them directly. Because I personally think that both of your ways of integrating both IFS and restorative justice are just so healing and transformative. So I'm grateful for the work that you're doing as well.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes. Sweet to be here with you. Hmm.
Likewise, yeah, it really is an honor and a pleasure. So, any closing affirmations that you want to give as to what it means to really have this internalized self-love triangle?
This might be dramatic, but I was writing about it this morning. And I was writing on for the slide, the course that's coming up on sort of the consequences, like how bad this could get. And like on the lighter scale, you have an inner shame triangle and you feel embarrassed and ashamed and you're concealing and cloaking yourself. That's the lighter scale. And the more extreme end of the scale, it's like this actually can take your life. And so, not to sound too extreme, but it's what I've actually seen and experienced that, doing this level of transformation can not just make your life more content and inner peace, which is wonderful, it also can save your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things I'm really wanting to encourage people to imagine is what life would be like if every time that you felt upset or emotionally hurt or disturbed by something that's happening within you or to you, that your first response to yourself, your own pain, is one of just genuine compassion, ease, softness, care. Like, what if our inner voice was mostly just an ally?
Mm.
And just really want to say that's possible. That's not a far off or mystical thing.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. What both of you said, I think, and just throughout this interview, I've loved how both of you have given information that is so synergistic, right? It's like, I agree, it can save our life and it can make life worth it. Is kind of like, what I got from what David just shared, because like, what else is more, um, like when I have that experience of that I am my own inner ally, like no matter what comes up in me, I can handle it. And I feel this deep sense of contentment and inner peace. Like that's what makes life worth it, because then I can actually give my deepest gifts from that place. That is what allows me to be completely open-hearted and authentic and generous, and know my limits, and I find those win-wins, and so I agree. I think that's what you both teach people how to embody. And what else is more worth it? And so I encourage everybody to get David and Jessica's books and look at their websites and check out their course. And so it's just been such a pleasure, and I hope that everybody has a day that is filled with self-love, and to be self-centered, meaning centered in your self energy, meaning that you're self-compassionate and that inner ally. I hope that people can experience that as much as possible today. And so for that, until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.